In the highlands of the old country lay the town of Kavi, tucked between stony ridges and ancient olive groves. Once filled with song and bells, it had long since fallen silent. The great bell tower, cracked by a fire decades ago, had never been restored. The town accepted the silence and wore it like a tradition. Judge Samir, Kavi's quiet center, had served for 20 years. He spoke softly, ruled strictly, and trusted only what could be proven. His court had no gavel, no guards, only ink, parchment, and the rule of law. People obeyed him not out of fear, but respect. He was calm, precise, and untouched by passion. Samir believed justice was not a feeling but a calculation. When merchants quarreled, when neighbors argued, they came to him not for sympathy, but resolution. His rulings were fair, clear, and final. One evening, that stillness broke. A scream rang out, brief, sharp, unnatural. People rushed to the market square. A man lay dead in the street, blood soaking his clothes, a knife nearby. His name was Halim, a well-liked shopkeeper, no known enemies. Soon a name merged, Rafiq, son of a wealthy trader. Witnesses claimed they'd argued days before. Rumors swirled, but no one saw the crime. No one spoke with certainty. The case came to Judge Samir. He listened, he questioned, but no one stepped forward. No voice could break the silence. And so, by the letter of the law, Samir ruled, Rafiq must go free. The law demands truth, not rumor, he said. Without witness or confession, there is no case. The town held its breath. Rafiq walked free. No one protested, but something shifted. People avoided eye contact. Shops closed earlier. Silence, once chosen, now felt imposed. That night, Samir sat in his office longer than usual. His scribes had gone. The lamps burned low. Outside, the old bell tower stood dark. Then a knock at the courthouse door. Judge Samir opened the courthouse door just past dusk. On the stone steps stood a stranger, bent-backed, gray-bearded, holding a cloth-covered object. His clothes were travel-worn, his sandals frayed. "You are the judge," the man said. It wasn't a question. "I am," Samir replied. "And you?" "Once," the man said, "I was a bellmaker." He stepped forward and unwrapped the bundle. Inside was a bell, small, bronze, smooth, no inscription. It looked ordinary. "This is not for a tower," the bellmaker said. "It is for a courtroom. It rings not by hand, but by lie." Samir frowned. "A trick?" "Number A craft. The metal remembers truth. When words spoken near it betray what is, it will ring." Samir said nothing. He did not believe in magic. But he saw something in the man's eyes, tired certainty, not madness. "Why bring it to me?" "Because your court is quiet," the bellmaker said. "Too quiet." He left the bell on the judge's table and walked back into the night. Samir didn't touch it. He studied it for days. No wires, no levers, just bronze. But he couldn't ignore what had happened. A man was dead. A suspect walked free. And the silence in Kavi was beginning to rot. One morning, Samir conducted a quiet test. He called in his 2 scribes, asked each a question about the records. One replied accurately. The other hesitated, then lied about a missing file. The bell, resting on the windowsill, gave off a faint chime, a sound no one had heard in years. The scribe went pale. Samir dismissed them and locked the door. He stared at the bell. It did not glow. It did not move. It simply waited. The judge did not speak of the bell. He made no announcements. But the next trial he scheduled would not be like the others. It was time to reopen the case of Halim's murder. He summoned Rafiq again, and this time the bell would listen. even if no one else dared speak? The sun was sharp the morning Rafiq returned to the courthouse. He wore a clean robe, darker than before, his expression unreadable. Beside him walked his father, Bahir, a man with gold on his fingers and oil in his voice. "You summoned my son again, Judge," Bahir said. "Has something changed?" Judge Samir nodded toward the table where the bell now sat, unremarkable but present. "We will hear the testimony again. New evidence has surfaced." Bahir raised an eyebrow. No witnesses came forward. No proof was found. What evidence could there be? "I'll ask the questions," Samir said, his voice low. The courtroom was fuller this time. News had spread, not about the bell, but about a second trial. People who had stayed silent the first time now came to watch, curious if justice might speak after all. Samir began simply. "Rafiq, did you see Halim on the night he died?" Rafiq's lips parted, then pressed shut. "No," he said. "I was home." The bell gave a low, sharp chime. Just once. A murmur rose in the room. Rafiq turned pale. Bahir stiffened. Samir didn't react. "Were you near the market square that evening?" "No," Rafiq said again. The bell rang louder. Gasps filled the chamber. The sound wasn't loud, but in Kavi, where silence ruled, it was thunder. "What is this?" Bahir shouted. "This is not law." "It is truth," Samir replied calmly. "Let it speak." He turned to the crowd. "Is there anyone who saw what happened that night?" Silence. Then, slowly, an old woman stood. Her voice trembled. I saw a shadow running toward Bahir's warehouse." A younger man stood next. "I heard shouting. Rafiq's voice. I know it." The bell remained still. Samir nodded. "Why did you not speak before?" The young man looked down. "Fear." Now voices rose in waves, not shouting, not chaos, but truth, untangled by courage. The bell stayed silent through it all, as if resting. By the end of the day, Samir had heard enough. "Rafiq," he said, "you are guilty of Halim's murder, and now, by the truth of your words, the sentence is just." Rafiq wept. Bahir said nothing. As the courtroom emptied, no one looked at the judge. They looked at the bell, silent now, but changed. Not a tool of fear. A reminder. The truth had spoken, and Kavi had listened. In the days following Rafiq's conviction, the town of Kavi did not return to silence. Something had shifted. At market stalls, voices grew a shade louder. Neighbors greeted each other with less caution. People no longer crossed the street to avoid questions. They welcomed them. At the center of it all was a bell that no longer rang. Judge Samir kept it on his desk, polished but untouched. It did not respond to idle chatter, nor to half-truths born of politeness. Only when a lie carried intent, when it twisted meaning, did the bell stir. Samir tested it in quiet ways. A merchant accused a rival of theft. Under questioning, his tone changed. The bell rang. The merchant broke, confessing to planting false evidence. A land dispute followed. Two brothers argued over boundary stones. One lied, and the bell sang once, soft but sure. The dispute was settled in minutes. News spread beyond Kavi. Visitors arrived to watch trials. Some called the bell sorcery, others salvation. A few came just to see if it would ring for them. Most left without hearing it. But the air in the courthouse was no longer heavy. It held breath. It waited. One afternoon a child entered. She held a broken toy and accused her older sister of snapping it in anger. The girl stood firm. "I didn't break it," she said, eyes wide. The bell said nothing. Samir smiled gently. "Then it was an accident." The girl hesitated, then nodded. "I dropped it. I didn't want to get in trouble. Still the bell did not chime, a half-truth spoken in fear, not harm. Later that evening, Samir stared at the bell long after court was done. He was beginning to understand. The bell didn't punish every falsehood. It judged intention. It was not truth's hammer. It was its ear. In time, people brought their disputes less frequently. Many began settling matters themselves, speaking honestly, afraid not of punishment, but of being revealed. No one wanted to be the one who made the bell ring, and in that growing honesty, Samir saw something unfamiliar in Kavi: trust. One morning, as he walked through the square, a boy asked, "Judge, will the bell ever leave the courthouse?" Samir paused. Perhaps, when it's no longer needed there. The courtroom was crowded before sunrise. Word had spread that Bahir, the wealthy trader and father of Rafiq, was to be tried. Not for the murder, but for obstruction, for threatening witnesses and silencing truth. It was the trial many feared and others longed for. Judge Samir arrived early. The bell sat in plain view. Its presence no longer surprised anyone, but it still commanded silence. The people leaned forward, waiting. Bahir entered, no longer in silk, but in plain cloth. His face was drawn. He did not look at the bell. The charges were read: tampering, intimidation, bribery. Witness after witness stood. They spoke of veiled threats, gold left at doorsteps, letters burned in fear. Bahir denied it all. "I protected my son," he said. "I told people to stay quiet, yes, but only because gossip ruins lives. There was no crime." The bell was silent. Samir narrowed his eyes. "Did you pay anyone to withhold testimony?" "No." The bell rang, a clean, sharp tone. Gasps. Bahir flinched. "Did you destroy evidence?" "No." The bell rang again. Now he turned toward it. "It's a trick," he said. "Metal doesn't know truth." Samir raised his hand. "And yet it listens better than you do." Witnesses continued. A clerk from Bahir's warehouse brought a torn ledger. Hidden entries showed payments, amounts, names, bribes disguised as wages. Bahir stood in silence. The crowd was still, watching, not judging, but listening, as they had learned to do. When the final words were spoken, Samir did not retreat to chambers. He stood, hands folded, eyes firm. "Bahir, you are guilty, not of murder, but of betraying your city, of placing silence above justice." The bell did not ring. No lie remained. Samir paused, as if weighing something deeper than law. "You will not be imprisoned. You will work. You will rebuild the burned library you funded years ago, not with gold, but with your hands." Bahir looked stunned. "Why such mercy?" "Because justice is not vengeance," Samir replied, "and the people must see a man rebuilt, not ruined." Outside, as Bahir left in silence, some turned away, but others watched him with something like curiosity, not hatred. And that night, for the first time in years, someone climbed the old bell tower, not to place a bell, but to light a lamp. Its glow spread across the square. The bell no longer rang often, and yet it spoke louder than ever. In Kavi, the people had changed. Disputes, once dragged to court, were now resolved in gardens, on porches, over bread. Children confessed their mischief before being asked. Traders corrected their own ledgers before audits. A quiet honesty was growing, fragile, but real. Judge Samir watched this with cautious hope. The bell remained on his desk, more symbol than tool. It had rung only twice in the last month. And yet the court was busier than ever, not with accusations, but with confessions. People came to speak not for justice, but for peace. One man admitted he had taken extra grain during a drought, another that she had lied about her neighbor's fence out of jealousy. Small things, deep things. The bell was mostly silent, but the air in the room trembled each time. It was not fear of the bell that moved them. It was the desire to be clear inside. One day a traveler entered. He was not from Kavi. He spoke loudly, laughed during proceedings, and scoffed at the stories he'd heard. "You let a piece of metal decide who's lying," he said. "I've tricked better judges than you." Samir simply pointed. "Then speak." The man declared he had done nothing wrong, that his record was clean, that the charges against him, fraud in another town, were lies. The bell rang. The man laughed. "Must be broken." He tried again. The bell rang louder. This time silence followed. He went pale. His voice dropped. "I took money, but I needed it." Samir said nothing. The bell did not ring again. After a moment, the man whispered, "I didn't think it would matter." Samir finally spoke. "The truth always matters, not for judgment, but for repair." The man left without being sentenced, but he returned days later with the money. Kavi began to see more faces like his, strangers drawn by stories of a town where truth lived in air and metal and people's eyes. Some came to test the bell, most left changed, and Samir, alone in his chamber, began to write less and listen more. The bell, once a judge, had become a mirror, not a weapon, not a curse, a reminder. Years passed. The bell no longer stood on Judge Samir's desk. It rested now on a carved stone pedestal in the center of Kavi's main square, where everyone could see it, though few dared touch it. It had not rung in over a year. By then, it no longer needed to. The town had changed, not through laws, but through memory. Memory of the sound the bell made, not loud, but unmistakable. A tone that once heard lived in the bones. That memory became conscience. Children were told the story of the bell that listened. They learned its history, not through fables, but through their parents' eyes, when truth was spoken. Disputes still happened, but now people arrived at their neighbor's door, not the judge's bench. Markets ran with fairer prices, and craftsmen signed their work with pride, not fear. Judge Samir stayed in office longer than anyone expected. But one autumn morning, with the leaves falling like faded parchment, he posted a notice. He was stepping down. No scandal, no illness, only a belief that a town ready to hear itself no longer needed a single voice to decide. The townspeople gathered in the square. There was no farewell speech. Samir simply stood beside the bell and placed his hand on it once, then stepped back. Then something strange happened. Someone else, a baker, approached the bell and whispered a truth she'd held for years. The bell stayed silent. Another followed, a farmer, then a child. One by one, people came, not to be judged, but to be seen. By evening, the square was filled with candles and quiet conversation. The bell had not rung once, but no one doubted its presence. Samir, now a private man, lived simply on the edge of town. He gardened. He wrote letters no one read. He walked often to the square, not to listen for the bell, but to listen to the people. One day, a visitor asked an old merchant, "Why keep the bell if it doesn't ring?" The man smiled. "Because we remember how it used to, and that's enough." At dusk, when the wind swept down from the hills, it sometimes touched the bronze just so, and made a sound that wasn't quite a ring, more like a breath. The town of Kavi, once silent from fear, now listened out of choice. And in that listening, truth lived.